The fluorescent lights of the convenience store flickered as Adrian Cross counted the coins in his palm for the third time. 67 cents. That was all that stood between him and complete destitution. His hands trembled, not from the cold October air seeping through his thin jacket, but from the crushing weight of a decision no father should ever have to make. Buy bread for his daughter's breakfast, or keep enough gas in the car so he could drive her to the hospital for her chemotherapy appointment tomorrow. He chose the gas. As he walked out of that store empty-handed, his stomach growling, his 8-year-old daughter Lily's pale face flashing in his mind, Adrian had no idea that in exactly 47 hours, everything would change. Not for the better, not at first, but in a way that would test every fiber of his being and reveal a conspiracy so vast it would shake an entire city to its core. None of them knew that the broke janitor struggling to afford a loaf of bread would soon become the most dangerous man in Philadelphia. Not dangerous because of violence, but because he knew the truth. And the truth, as they say, has a way of destroying empires built on lies. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching story of survival, betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would do if you had to choose between food and medicine for someone you love. And if you believe that even when you're down to your last dollar, hope is still possible, hit that subscribe button. Stories like Adrian's need to be told, and you won't want to miss what happens next. This channel is all about real human struggles and the extraordinary strength we find when we have nothing left to lose. Now, let's see what happens when a man with nothing left discovers he has everything to fight for. Adrian Cross was 34 years old, but the mirror told a different story. The face staring back at him looked 50, with deep lines carved by stress, gray streaks threading through his dark brown hair, and eyes that had forgotten how to truly smile. 6 months ago, he had been a mid-level accountant at Whitmore Financial Services, pulling in a modest but stable $65,000 a year, enough to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, enough to cover Lily's medical bills with the company insurance, enough to occasionally take her to the zoo or buy her the art supplies she loved. Then came the diagnosis: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 3. The words had hit Adrian like a freight train, shattering the careful life he had built for himself and his daughter after his wife Rebecca died in a car accident 4 years earlier. The doctors said Lily needed aggressive treatment immediately. 6 months of intensive chemotherapy, possibly a bone marrow transplant, and round-the-clock monitoring. The insurance would cover most of it, they said. Most. What they didn't tell him was that most still left $20,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. $20,000 he didn't have. $20,000 that would grow to $40,000 once the experimental treatments became necessary. $40,000 that might as well have been $40 million. Adrian did what any father would do. He took out a second mortgage on a house he didn't own. He maxed out every credit card. He borrowed from friends who couldn't afford to lend. He sold everything of value: furniture, Rebecca's jewelry, his car, replacing it with a 15-year-old sedan held together by rust and prayer. And when that still wasn't enough, he started missing work to be with Lily during her worst days. The days when the chemo made her so sick she couldn't stop vomiting. The days when she was too weak to lift her head. That's when Whitmore Financial let him go. Performance issues, they called it. Excessive absences. They were very sorry, of course. They wished him and his daughter all the best. The severance package was generous by their standards: 2 weeks' pay and a company pen with inspirational words engraved on it. Excellence through perseverance. Adrian had laughed when he read it, a hollow, broken sound that startled even him. Then he threw the pen across the parking lot and drove to the hospital where Lily waited, bald and brave, asking him if the treatment was working yet. The apartment went first. The landlord was sympathetic but firm. 3 months of unpaid rent meant eviction, pure and simple. Adrian moved what little they had left into a storage unit and then into his car. For 2 weeks, they lived in that rusted sedan, parking in hospital lots, rest stops, anywhere security wouldn't chase them away. Lily never complained, not once. She would curl up in the back seat with her worn teddy bear, Mr. Whiskers, and tell Adrian stories about the adventures they would have when she got better. They would go to the beach. They would visit the Grand Canyon. They would adopt a puppy. Adrian would listen to her soft voice in the darkness, his heart shattering into smaller and smaller pieces, wondering how much more a person could break before there was nothing left to break. The job at Patterson Industries came from desperation. Adrian had applied to 73 positions in 6 weeks: gas station attendant, grocery bagger, warehouse worker, fast food cashier. Most didn't respond. Those that did took one look at his former position as an accountant and assumed he would quit the moment something better came along. They weren't wrong to think it, but they were wrong to assume he had the luxury of being selective. Patterson Industries was different. They didn't care about his overqualified resume. They needed mite janitors for their sprawling pharmaceutical research facility on the outskirts of the city, and they needed them immediately. The pay was $11 an hour, no benefits, no sick days, but it came with one crucial detail. The shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which meant Adrian could spend the days with Lily, taking her to appointments, sitting by her hospital bed, being present for the daughter who needed him more than anything in the world. He chose the job. The work was exactly what you would expect: mopping endless hallways, emptying trash bins, scrubbing toilets, polishing floors that would be dirty again by morning. The building was massive, 12 floors of laboratories, offices, and restricted areas that Adrian's security clearance didn't permit him to enter. He worked alone most nights, his only companions the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional security guard making rounds. But Adrian didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he welcomed it. The physical labor helped him forget, if only for a few hours, the crushing reality waiting for him outside these walls. While his hands pushed a mop across sterile floors, his mind could pretend that life was normal, that his daughter was home in her own bed instead of a hospital ward, that his wife was still alive, that the universe hadn't decided to test exactly how much suffering one man could endure. What Adrian didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he emptied trash bins and cleaned whiteboards covered with complex chemical formulas, was that Patterson Industries was not what it seemed. The pharmaceutical research they conducted on the upper floors was legitimate, groundbreaking work on cancer treatments that would save thousands of lives. But in the basement levels, the ones Adrian's keycard wouldn't open, something else was happening, something that had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with profit. It started small, as these things always do, a conversation overheard while cleaning an office after hours. 2 executives, thinking they were alone, discussing Phase 3 complications and acceptable mortality rates and containing the Alabama situation. Adrian paid it no attention at first. Medical research always involved risk. That was the nature of clinical trials. Then he found the folder. It was a Tuesday night, 3 months into his employment at Patterson Industries. Adrian was cleaning the 5th-floor conference room, a space typically reserved for board meetings and high-level discussions. Someone had left a manila folder on the table, partially hidden under a stack of presentation materials. Adrian almost ignored it. His job was to clean, not to snoop. But as he reached to move it aside, the folder slipped, spilling papers across the fresh, polished table. Adrian gathered them quickly, not reading, just collecting, but his eyes, trained from years as an accountant to spot anomalies in numbers, caught something. A spreadsheet. A very specific spreadsheet tracking adverse events in a clinical trial called Helixorin. The numbers were staggering. Out of 1,200 participants in the trial, 243 had experienced severe complications. 47 had died. That alone wasn't necessarily damning. Clinical trials for serious diseases often involved high-risk patients, people for whom conventional treatments had failed. But it was the dates that made Adrian's blood run cold. The trial had been approved and fast-tracked by the FDA 8 months ago. The deaths had started appearing within 6 weeks, and yet, according to the documents, none of these adverse events had been reported to the regulatory agencies overseeing the trial. None of them. Adrian's hand shook as he shuffled through more papers, internal memos discussing how to manage the narrative around patient deaths, emails about paying off families to sign non-disclosure agreements, financial projections showing that Helix Orin, if approved, would generate $14 billion in revenue over 5 years, and a handwritten note clipped to the back of the folder. JH, recommend we proceed as planned. Acceptable losses given ROI. Destroy after reading. JH, Jeremy Hartwell, the CEO of Patterson Industries. Adrian stood in that empty conference room, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to put the papers back, walk away, forget he had ever seen them. He was a janitor. He had no power, no resources, no ability to fight a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He had a dying daughter who needed him focused on her survival, not tilting at windmills. Getting involved would only destroy what little stability he had managed to scrape together. But 47 people were dead. 47 people who had trusted Patterson Industries to help them. 47 families who would never know the truth about what happened to someone they loved. Adrian thought about Lily, about the experimental treatment she might need if the standard chemotherapy didn't work. He thought about all the desperate parents like himself, willing to try anything to save their children, trusting that the companies developing these treatments had their best interests at heart. He thought about what Rebecca would do if she were here. Rebecca, who had always believed in doing the right thing even when it cost you everything. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. Every page, every memo, every piece of evidence that proved Patterson Industries was knowingly allowing people to die to protect their bottom line. His hands trembled so badly that several photos came out blurred, but he kept going, documenting everything he could. He had just finished when he heard footsteps in the hallway. Adrian's heart seized in his chest. The footsteps were purposeful, growing closer. He shoved his phone into his pocket and quickly reassembled the folder, placing it back where he had found it. By the time the conference room door opened, Adrian was calmly wiping down the table, his cleaning supplies arranged around him in a careful display of janitorial innocence. A man entered, tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit despite the late hour. Adrian recognized him immediately. Jeremy Hartwell himself, the CEO. Behind him came 2 other men, both in dark suits, both with the kind of cold eyes that suggested security or something worse. "You," Hartwell said, looking at Adrian with the barest hint of recognition. "You're the new janitor, correct?" "Yes, sir," Adrian replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Just finishing up in here." Hartwell's gaze swept the room, landing on the folder. Something flickered across his face, too quick for Adrian to identify. "How long have you been in this room?" "About 10 minutes, sir. Just doing the standard cleaning." "Did you touch anything on the table? Any papers?" Adrian's mouth went dry. He could feel the weight of his phone in his pocket, heavy as a stone. "No, sir. I always leave documents exactly as I find them, part of the job." Hartwell studied him for a long moment. Adrian forced himself to meet the man's eyes, to not look away, to not show the terror coursing through his veins. Finally, Hartwell nodded. "Good. This room contains sensitive materials. If you ever see documents left out, you are to inform security immediately. Do not touch them, do not read them, do not even look at them. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir." "Excellent." Hartwell turned to one of the men beside him. "Roger, make sure we update the security protocols. I don't want cleaning staff in the upper floors unsupervised." He glanced back at Adrian. "No offense, I'm sure you're very trustworthy, but we can't be too careful with proprietary information." "I understand completely, sir." Hartwell collected the folder and left without another word. The 2 security men followed, but not before one of them, Roger, gave Adrian a long, measuring look that promised they would be watching him very carefully from now on. Adrian waited until their footsteps faded completely before he allowed himself to breathe. His entire body was shaking, adrenaline flooding his system. He had just done something monumentally stupid. He had just stolen evidence from one of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the country. And he did it with no plan, no backup, no idea what to do next. All he knew was that he couldn't let 47 deaths be swept under the rug. He couldn't let Patterson Industries continue killing people while pretending to save them. Even if it cost him everything, even if it destroyed the fragile life he had managed to scrape together, he had to do something. He finished his shift in a daze, going through the motions of cleaning while his mind spun in circles. By the time 6 a.m. arrived, Adrian had made his decision. He would take the evidence to the authorities, the FDA, the police, someone who had the power to investigate, to hold Patterson accountable, to stop the deaths before more families suffered. He drove straight to the hospital where Lily was staying overnight for observation after a particularly rough round of chemo. She was asleep when he arrived, her small body barely making a dent under the white hospital sheets. Adrian sat beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall, counting her breaths like he did every morning to reassure himself she was still alive. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered, brushing a strand of imaginary hair from her forehead. She had lost all her hair 2 months ago, but he still found himself reaching for it, muscle memory of a life before cancer. "Daddy might have to do something scary, but it's the right thing. Your mom would want me to do it, and I want you to grow up in a world where people don't get hurt just because some rich men want to get richer." Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" "I'm here, sweetheart. Are you okay? You look worried." Adrian forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired from work. How are you feeling?" "Okay, I guess. Dr. Patel says my members are getting better." Then she paused, then added quietly, "Daddy, when I get better, can we get a house again? I miss having my own room." The words cut deeper than any knife. Adrian swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Yeah, baby, when you get better, we'll get a house with a big backyard where you can play. And a puppy? And a puppy." Lily smiled, a beautiful, heartbreaking expression of pure trust. She believed him. She believed that everything would be okay because her daddy said so. And Adrian would die before he let her down. After Lily fell back asleep, Adrian left the hospital and drove to the nearest police station. The building was old, worn, the kind of place that had seen decades of human tragedy parade through its doors. Adrian walked up to the front desk, his phone clenched in his sweating palm, and asked to speak with someone about corporate fraud. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, directed him to the second floor. Detective Luis Pacheco, he was told, handled white-collar crimes. Adrian climbed the stairs, his heart pounding, and found himself in a cramped office smelling of old coffee and cigarette smoke that someone had tried and failed to mask with air freshener. Detective Pacheco was in his 50s, with a weathered face and the kind of world-weary expression that came from seeing too much and believing in too little. He listened to Adrian's story with increasing interest, his eyes sharpening when Adrian showed him the photographs on his phone. "This is serious," Pacheco said finally, leaning back in his chair. "If what you're saying is true, we're talking about criminally negligent homicide, at minimum, maybe manslaughter, definitely fraud. But you understand this is going to be complicated, right? Patterson Industries has an army of lawyers. They donate heavily to political campaigns. They're connected at every level." "I don't care," Adrian said. "People died. More people will die if someone doesn't stop them." Pacheco studied him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this? You could lose your job, you could get sued, they could make your life hell." "My life is already hell," Adrian replied quietly. "My daughter has cancer, I'm living in my car, I clean toilets for $11 an hour. What more can they take from me?" Something shifted in Pacheco's expression, a hint of respect maybe, or recognition. "Okay," he said, "give me a few days to look into this. I'll need to coordinate with federal agencies since this involves FDA regulations. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't go back to work until I call you. And for God's sakes, watch your back." Adrian left the police station feeling lighter than he had in months. He had done it. He had taken the first step. Justice would be served. The people responsible would be held accountable. Everything would be okay. He had no idea how wrong he was. 3 days passed. Adrian spent them at the hospital with Lily, who was having a good week. Her appetite had returned slightly, and she was strong enough to sit up and work on a drawing she was making for the nurses. Adrian tried to focus on these small victories, these moments of normalcy, but his mind kept drifting back to the evidence on his phone, to Detective Pacheco's investigation, to the inevitable reckoning that would soon fall on Patterson Industries. On the 4th day, Adrian received a phone call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Cross?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "My name is Gordon Fletcher. I'm an attorney representing Patterson Industries. We need to talk." Adrian's stomach dropped. "I have nothing to say to you." "I think you do. You see, we're aware that you took photographs of confidential company documents without authorization. That constitutes theft of intellectual property, breach of your employment contract, and violation of the non-disclosure agreement you signed when you were hired. We could pursue criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that would bankrupt you for the rest of your life." "Those documents prove your company is killing people," Adrian said, his voice shaking with rage. "You can sue me all you want. I don't have anything left to take." "Don't you?" Fletcher's voice turned cold. "What about your daughter's treatment? I believe she's currently receiving care at Mercy General Hospital, care that costs approximately $8,000 per week, care that's currently being covered by the hospital's charity program because you can't afford to pay. It would be unfortunate if that charity suddenly decided they could no longer support your daughter's treatment. Unfortunate, but not illegal. Hospitals make these decisions all the time based on resource availability." Adrian's blood turned to ice. "You wouldn't." "We wouldn't want to," Fletcher corrected, "but sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. Of course, this all becomes much simpler if you're willing to be reasonable. Delete the photographs from your phone and any cloud storage they may be backed up to. Sign a statement admitting you fabricated evidence in an attempt to extort money from Patterson Industries. And in return, we'll forget this unfortunate incident ever happened. We'll even throw in a little bonus, $100,000 placed in a trust fund for your daughter's medical care, enough to cover her treatment for at least another year, maybe more." Adrian couldn't breathe. His vision swam. They were threatening his daughter. They were holding Lily's life hostage to protect their crimes. "You're monsters," he whispered. "We're businessmen, Mr. Cross. There's a difference. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires and we pursue every legal remedy available to us, including, unfortunately, making sure that Mercy General understands exactly what kind of man you are, a liar, a thief, and someone willing to fabricate evidence for personal gain. I don't imagine they'll want to continue supporting your daughter's care after that." The line went dead. Adrian stood in the hospital parking lot, his phone clutched in his shaking hand, his world crumbling around him for what felt like the 100th time. They had backed him into a corner with no escape. If he went forward with the evidence, they would destroy Lily's access to treatment. If he stayed silent, more people would die from helixorin. There was no right choice. There was only choosing which nightmare to live in. He thought about calling Detective Pacheco, but what could the detective do? Patterson Industries hadn't broken any laws with their threat. They were simply exercising their right to protect their business interests. They would tie everything up in legal proceedings for years, while Lily's cancer spread and Adrian drowned in debt and desperation. For the first time since this nightmare began, Adrian felt true despair. Not the grinding hopelessness of poverty or the terror of watching your child suffer, but the absolute certainty that he had lost, that there was no path forward, that the universe had finally broken him completely. He walked back into the hospital in a daze, his feet carrying him automatically to Lily's room. She was awake, sitting up in bed, working on her drawing. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that could have powered the sun. "Daddy, look what I made!" She held up the paper, a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "It's you and me when I get better. We're going to the beach like you promised." Adrian took the drawing with trembling hands, his eyes blurring with tears he couldn't let her see. "It's beautiful, baby girl. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Are you crying, Daddy?" "Just a little," I admitted. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy, and you make me so happy, Lily, so incredibly happy. I love you more than anything in this world." "I love you too, Daddy, more than Mr. Whiskers, more than ice cream, more than rainbows." Adrian gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her carefully because she was so fragile, so precious, so impossibly brave. And in that moment, he made his decision. Not the decision Patterson Industries wanted, not the decision that would save him from ruin, but the only decision he could make and still look at himself in the mirror. He would fight, even if it destroyed him, even if it cost him everything, even if he lost. Because 47 people were dead, and Lily's drawing showed a world where people kept promises, where fathers protected their children, where good people did good things because it was right. And Adrian Cross might be broke, might be broken, might be down to his last dollar and his last shred of hope, but he would not be the man who chose silence over justice. The battle had only just begun. I hope you're still with us, because this is where things are about to get even more intense. If you're feeling the weight of Adrian's impossible choice, if you're rooting for him to find a way through this nightmare, do me a favor right now, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you would do in his position, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the next part of this story will blow your mind. We're building a community here of people who believe in justice, who believe that one person can make a difference, and I promise you, you do not want to miss how this unfolds. The truth is about to explode in ways no one saw coming, and you need to be here for every second of it. Now let's see what happens when a man with nothing left becomes the most dangerous person in the room. Adrian spent that night in his car, parked in the hospital lot where security had learned to ignore him. Sleep was impossible. His mind spun in circles, playing through scenarios, calculating risks, trying to find an angle he had missed. By dawn, he had the skeleton of a plan. It was desperate. It was probably suicidal, but it was all he had. The first call he made was to Detective Pacheco. The detective answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Cross, it's 6 a.m. This better be important." "They threatened my daughter," Adrian said without preamble. "Patterson Industries. They said they'd cut off my daughter's medical treatment if I destroy the evidence and sign a statement saying I made it all up." There was a long silence on the other end. When Pacheco spoke again, his voice was careful. "That's a serious accusation. Did you record this threat?" "No, it was a phone call from their lawyer, Gordon Fletcher." "Fletcher." Pacheco's tone changed, becoming wary. "I need to tell you something. I've been looking into your claims, and I've hit walls everywhere I turn. Patterson Industries has friends in very high places. The DA's office is reluctant to pursue this without ironclad evidence. The FDA representative I contacted suddenly stopped returning my calls, and yesterday my captain called me into his office and strongly suggested I focus on other cases." "They got to you," Adrian said, his last hope crumbling. "They bought you off." "No one bought me off," Pacheco snapped, "but I can't fight this battle alone. I'm one detective in a department of 300, and Patterson Industries just donated $5 million to the police benefit fund. You do the math." Honestly, take the money, protect your daughter. Sometimes that's the only choice we get. Adrian ended the call and sat in the pre-dawn darkness, his last ally gone. The system he had trusted to deliver justice had failed him just like everything else. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. Except he wasn't. Not entirely. Adrian pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, landing on a name he hadn't called in over a year, Desmond Knox. They had worked together at Whitmore Financial before Adrian was fired. Desmond had left the company 6 months earlier to become a journalist, chasing his lifelong dream of investigative reporting. He worked for the Philadelphia Sentinel now, a mid-sized newspaper with a reputation for occasionally taking on powerful interests. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot Adrian had left. Desmond answered on the first ring, sounding far more alert than any person should be at this hour. Adrian Cross. Hell, I thought you fell off the face of the earth. How's Lily doing? She's fighting, Adrian said. Look, Desmond, I need your help. I have evidence of a major pharmaceutical company covering up patient deaths in a clinical trial. 47 people dead, and they're trying to silence me. There was a sharp intake of breath. Patterson Industries? How did you know? Because I've been investigating them for 3 months, Desmond said, his voice quickening with excitement. I heard rumors about Helix Orin, but I couldn't get anyone to talk. They've got NDAs tighter than Fort Knox and enough lawyers to bury anyone who speaks up. What kind of evidence do you have? Internal documents, spreadsheets tracking the deaths, memos discussing covering it up, financial projections showing they knew about the risks but proceeded anyway because the profit potential was too high. Holy shit, Desmond breathed. Adrian, if this is real, this is Pulitzer-level stuff. This could take down their entire executive team. But you need to understand what you're getting into. Patterson will come after you with everything they have. They'll destroy your reputation. They'll bankrupt you. They already threatened to cut off my daughter's medical treatment if I don't destroy the evidence and recant, Adrian interrupted. I'm already destroyed, Adrian. I have nothing left to lose except my integrity, and I'll be damned if I let them take that too. There was a long pause. When Desmond spoke again, his voice was serious, weighted with understanding. Okay, meet me at the Sentinel offices in 2 hours. Bring everything you have. And Adrian, don't trust anyone except me. Patterson has informants everywhere. Adrian spent the next 2 hours in a state of hyper-vigilance, jumping at every car that passed, scanning every face for signs of surveillance. He made copies of all the photos on 3 separate thumb drives, storing them in different locations. If Patterson was going to silence him, they would have to work for it. The Philadelphia Sentinel occupied a weathered building in the old press district, its brick facade still bearing faded painted advertisements from decades past. Adrian arrived early, parking 2 blocks away and walking the rest of the distance, checking constantly for anyone following him. He felt ridiculous, paranoid, like a character in a spy movie. But the fear was real, grounded in the very tangible threat against his daughter's life. Desmond met him in the lobby, looking exactly as Adrian remembered, tall, lanky, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of intensity that marked true believers. They shook hands, and Desmond led him upstairs to a cluttered newsroom that smelled of coffee and decades of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the walls long before smoking bans existed. "Let me see what you have," Desmond said, settling into his desk chair. Adrian handed over his phone, watching as Desmond's eyes widened while scrolling through the photographs. The journalist's expression shifted from interest to shock to something that looked like vindication. "This is gold," he muttered. "This is absolute gold. The spreadsheet alone would be enough to trigger an investigation, but these memos, these emails discussing paying off families? Adrian, you just handed me the biggest story of my career." "What happens now?" Adrian asked. "Now I verify everything. I'll need to confirm these documents are authentic, cross-reference them with public records, maybe find some of the trial participants or their families willing to talk. With evidence this strong, I can probably get it done in 48 hours. Then we publish, and all hell breaks loose." 48 hours? Adrian's heart sank. "The lawyer gave me 24 hours to respond to their offer." "Then you stall," firmly said Desmond. "Tell them you need more time. Tell them you're consulting with your own attorney. Tell them whatever you need to buy me time to get this story ready. Once it's published, the entire game changes. They can't threaten you or suppress evidence when the whole world is watching." It made sense. It was a good plan, but Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something, that some critical piece was still waiting to destroy him. He left the Sentinel offices and drove straight to Mercy General Hospital. The morning shift was changing, nurses and doctors hurrying through corridors with the purposeful chaos that defined hospital life. Adrian went straight to Lily's room and found her sitting up, looking stronger than she had in weeks. Her numbers had improved, Dr. Patel had told him yesterday. The chemo was working. If this trajectory continued, they might even be able to discharge her for outpatient treatment within a month. "Daddy!" Lily's face lit up. "Dr. Patel said I might get to leave soon, like actually leave and not come back every day." Adrian forced a smile, his heart breaking with love and terror in equal measure. "That's amazing, baby girl. That's the best news I've heard in forever. Where will we go when I leave? We don't have an apartment anymore." "We'll figure it out," Adrian promised, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Maybe we'll find a new place, somewhere with a yard like I promised." "And a puppy?" "And a puppy." Lily smiled, then grew serious. "Daddy, why do you look so worried all the time? Is it because of money?" Adrian's throat tightened. His daughter was 8 years old and already understood that money was the force shaping their lives. "I'm not worried," he lied. "I'm just tired. Work has been busy." "You're a bad liar," Lily said with the brutal honesty of children. "But it's okay. I know things are hard. I heard the nurses talking about how we can't pay for stuff. But it's gonna be okay, Daddy. I know it is. Because we have each other, and that's what matters, right?" Adrian pulled his daughter into a gentle hug, careful of her IV lines and the port in her chest. "You're the smartest, bravest person I know," he whispered. "And yes, we have each other. That's all that matters." He stayed with Lily for the rest of the morning, reading to her, helping her with a puzzle, pretending that their life was normal and that he was carrying evidence that could topple a pharmaceutical empire. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your 24 hours are almost up. We need your answer by 5 p.m. today. Don't test us." Adrian stared at the message, his hands beginning to shake. He typed out a response. "I need more time. This is a major decision. Give me until the end of the week." The response came within seconds. "No extensions. 5 p.m. or the consequences begin. Choose wisely." Adrian closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in. 6 hours. That's all he had before Patterson Industries made good on their threats. And Desmond needed 48 hours to verify and publish the story. The math didn't work. No matter what Adrian did, he was going to lose. Unless an idea began to form, desperate and dangerous. He looked at his daughter, peacefully working on her puzzle, trusting him completely to make everything okay. He thought about the 47 people who had died, about the families who deserved to know the truth, about the kind of man he wanted to be for Lily. Then he made his choice. At 4:30 p.m., Adrian called the number Gordon Fletcher had contacted him from. The lawyer answered immediately. "Mr. Cross, I trust you've made a decision." "I have," Adrian said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I'll take your offer. I'll delete the photos and sign whatever statement you want, but I need the money transferred to my daughter's medical fund first. I need proof that you'll keep your end of the bargain." There was a pause, the sound of Fletcher conferring with someone in the background. "That's acceptable. Come to the Patterson Industries headquarters at 7 p.m. tonight. We'll have the paperwork ready and the funds will be transferred in your presence. Bring your phone so we can verify deletion of all materials." "I'll be there," Adrian said, and ended the call. He immediately texted Desmond, "They're meeting me at Patterson HQ at 7 p.m. to force me to destroy evidence. Can you be ready to publish by then?" Desmond's response came quickly. "No way. I need at least another day to verify sources and get legal clearance. Publishing unverified claims against a company like Patterson could destroy the paper." Adrian closed his eyes, his mind racing. Then he typed, "What if I recorded the meeting? What if I got them to admit on tape that they're covering up the deaths?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "That would change everything. But Adrian, that's incredibly dangerous. If they find out what you're doing—" "They won't," Adrian typed back, though he had no idea if that was true. "Just be ready to publish the moment I send you the recording. Can you do that?" "Yes, but please be careful. These people have already proven they're willing to do anything to protect themselves." Adrian spent the next 2 hours in preparation. He downloaded a recording app on his phone, tested it multiple times to ensure it would capture audio clearly even from his pocket. He wrote a letter to Lily, sealed it, and left it with a nurse he trusted, with instructions to give it to his daughter only if something happened to him. He drove to a copy shop and printed out every photograph from the evidence, storing the physical copies in a safety deposit box at a bank, the key hidden in a location only he knew. Then, as the sun began to set over Philadelphia, Adrian drove toward Patterson Industries headquarters, a gleaming 40-story tower of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. The building was a monument to corporate power, to the kind of success that came from putting profits before people. Adrian parked in the underground garage, checked one more time that his phone was recording, and took the elevator to the 40th floor where the executive offices waited. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that screamed expensive. Marble floors, original artwork on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than Adrian made in a year. A receptionist who looked like she belonged in a fashion magazine directed him to a conference room at the end of the hall. "Mr. Fletcher is expecting you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Adrian entered the conference room to find not just Gordon Fletcher, but 4 other people. He recognized Jeremy Hartwell, the CEO. The others were strangers, but their expensive suits and predatory expressions marked them as lawyers or executives. This wasn't a simple business transaction. This was an interrogation. "Mr. Cross," Fletcher said, gesturing to a chair at the far end of the table. "Please, sit. We have several documents for you to review and sign." Adrian sat, hyper-aware of his phone in his jacket pocket, of the record button he had pressed before entering the building. "Where's the proof of the fund transfer?" asked Adrian. Hartwell slid a tablet across the table. $100,000 placed in a trust for your daughter's medical expenses at Mercy General Hospital, as promised. The screen showed a bank statement, the numbers clear and official. "Now let's discuss your responsibilities." One of the lawyers, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, opened a folder. "You'll be signing 3 documents tonight. First, a non-disclosure agreement with a penalty clause of $5 million for any breach. Second, a statement admitting that you fabricated evidence in an attempt to extort money from Patterson. Third, a release absolving Patterson of any liability related to your employment or termination." "And if I refuse?" Adrian asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we destroy you," Hartwell said simply, dropping any pretense of civility. "We've already prepared a criminal complaint accusing you of corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. We have statements from security personnel who will testify they saw you photographing confidential documents. We have psychiatric evaluations purchased from a doctor who will swear you suffer from delusional disorder brought on by stress from your daughter's illness. We'll paint you as a desperate, mentally unstable man who fabricated evidence to squeeze money from a successful company. And your daughter's treatment will be immediately terminated," the sharp-eyed lawyer said. "Mercy General will receive notification that you are under investigation for fraud and that any charity provided to your family was obtained under false pretenses. They'll have no choice but to discontinue care." Adrian felt his hands shaking under the table. He forced his voice to remain calm. "You're monsters. You know people died because of Helix Orin, and you don't even care." "People die in clinical trials all the time," Hartwell said dismissively. "It's an unfortunate but necessary part of medical progress. The trial participants were terminally ill. They were going to die anyway." Except they died faster because your drug was toxic and you knew it. The documents I found show you knew about the complications within 6 weeks of the trial starting, but you didn't report them because stopping the trial would cost you billions in projected revenue. Hartwell's expression hardened. You're making serious accusations based on documents you had no authorization to access, documents that, without proper context, could be wildly misinterpreted by someone without medical or pharmaceutical expertise. Like the memo that specifically said acceptable losses given ROI? Adrian pressed. That seems pretty clear to me. That memo, Fletcher interjected, was discussing statistical modeling of risk-benefit ratios in high-risk patient populations. It's standard pharmaceutical language that a layman might misunderstand. Adrian realized what they were doing. They were giving him their official response, their prepared narrative when these allegations eventually surfaced. They had already wargamed every scenario, prepared every defense, and they were confident, absolutely confident that they would win. 47 people, Adrian said quietly, 47 people with families, with children, with lives that mattered. And you're sitting here telling me their deaths were acceptable because they were already sick? Because stopping your trial would hurt your profit margin? Their deaths were unfortunate, Hartwell said, but Helixorin, if approved, will save thousands of lives, tens of thousands. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. Who decides what the greater good is? Adrian asked. You, a handful of executives in a boardroom, calculating how many deaths you can get away with before it affects your stock price? This conversation is pointless, the sharp-eyed lawyer said. Mr. Cross, you have 2 choices. Sign the documents, take the money, and walk away. Or refuse and we'll destroy you so thoroughly that your daughter will grow up thinking her father was a lying, delusional criminal. Those are your only options. Adrian looked at each face around the table. Not one showed a hint of shame or remorse. They were so certain of their power, so confident in their invincibility, that they saw him as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to be removed. They had no idea that every word they had just said was being recorded, that their casual admission of covering up deaths, their callous calculation of acceptable losses, their threats against a dying child were all being documented in perfect digital clarity. I want to understand something, Adrian said. Before I sign anything, I need to know. Did you ever feel anything for those 47 people? Did you ever think about their families? Or were they just numbers on a spreadsheet from the beginning? They were trial participants who understood the risks, Hartwell said impatiently. They signed consent forms. They knew experimental treatments carried dangers. We did nothing illegal. But you did hide evidence from the FDA, Adrian said. You did pay families to sign NDAs instead of reporting adverse events. You did continue a trial you knew was killing people because the financial projections were too good to pass up. Legal or not, you know what you did was wrong. Wrong? Hartwell leaned forward, his eyes cold. Let me tell you what's wrong, Mr. Cross. What's wrong is a janitor with no medical training, no pharmaceutical expertise, no understanding of the complexity of drug development, deciding he knows better than scientists and doctors who have dedicated their lives to saving people. What's wrong is someone like you trying to destroy years of research and billions of dollars in investment because you can't understand the bigger picture. The bigger picture? Adrian repeated. Is that what you call it when you let people die? I call it progress, Hartwell snapped. I call it the price of innovation. Do you think any major medical breakthrough came without cost, without risk, without people dying along the way? That's the reality of pushing the boundaries of science. And people like you, sitting in judgment with your simplistic moral absolutism, have no idea what it takes to actually change the world. You're right, Adrian said quietly. I don't understand how someone can justify letting people die for money. I don't understand how you can sit across from a father who's watching his daughter die and threaten to cut off her treatment unless he keeps quiet about your crimes. I don't understand how any of you sleep at night." Fletcher slammed his hand on the table. "Enough philosophy. Sign the goddamn documents or get out. We've wasted enough time on you." Adrian reached for the papers, his hand hovering over the pen they had provided. Every person in the room leaned forward slightly, watching, waiting for his surrender. The moment stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. Then Adrian pulled his hand back. "No," he said simply. The room erupted. Fletcher shot to his feet, his face reddening. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Maybe," Adrian agreed, standing up, "but it won't be the worst thing I've ever done. That would be staying silent while you keep killing people." He turned toward the door. "Your daughter," Hartwell said, his voice like ice. "Think about your daughter, Mr. Cross. Think about what happens to her when Mercy General terminates her treatment. Think about watching her die because you were too stubborn to make a simple compromise." Adrian stopped, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, just a moment, he wavered. The image of Lily, pale and weak, being denied the treatment keeping her alive, nearly broke him. But then he thought about the drawing she had made, the two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be when she looked at that drawing, the kind of man Rebecca would have wanted him to be. "I am thinking about my daughter," Adrian said without turning around. "I'm thinking about the world I want her to grow up in, a world where people who do wrong are held accountable, a world where one person standing up for what's right can make a difference, and I'm thinking about what I'll tell her someday about this moment. I'd rather tell her I fought and lost than that I surrendered without fighting at all." He opened the door and walked out, half expecting security to stop him, to drag him back, to make him disappear like a character in a thriller novel. But no one stopped him. He made it to the elevator, down to the parking garage, into his car. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. Only when he was 3 blocks away did he pull over, check his phone, and confirm that the entire conversation had been recorded perfectly. Every word, every threat, every admission. He sent the file to Desmond with a simple message: "Publish everything, now." Then he drove to the hospital, parked in his usual spot, and walked up to Lily's room, not knowing if this was the last time he would see her with treatment still flowing through her IV, not knowing if he had just sacrificed his daughter's life for a principle, not knowing anything except that he had done what he believed was right and now had to live with whatever consequences followed. Lily was asleep when he arrived. Adrian sat beside her bed, held her small hand in his, and waited for the world to explode. It didn't take long. Desmond worked through the night with his editor, legal team, and the newspaper's investigative unit. By 3 a.m., they had verified enough of the documents to proceed with publication. By 6 a.m., the story went live on the Potrero Sentinel's website. Patterson Industries covered up fatal drug trial results and threatened whistleblower's dying daughter. The article included everything: the photographs of internal documents, the spreadsheet tracking deaths, the memos discussing cover-ups, and the most damning of all, the audio recording from the conference room with Hartwell's cold voice discussing acceptable losses and Fletcher's threats against Lily's medical treatment. The response was instantaneous and volcanic. Within an hour, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. By noon, it was international news. Social media erupted with outrage. Medical ethics boards launched emergency investigations. The FDA announced a criminal inquiry into Patterson Industries' conduct. The Department of Justice opened a federal probe into potential healthcare fraud. And then the dominoes really started falling. 2 Patterson executives resigned by 10 a.m., followed by 3 more before lunch. The company's stock price plummeted, losing 40% of its value in one day of trading. Clinical trial participants and their families began filing lawsuits, represented by attorneys who smelled blood in the water. Congress announced hearings. State attorneys general launched their own investigations. Jeremy Hartwell held a disastrous press conference at 2 p.m., attempting to dismiss the allegations as taken out of context and based on stolen documents from a disgruntled employee. But the audio recording made that impossible. His own words, captured in perfect clarity, destroyed any possibility of spinning the narrative. By 5 p.m., the Patterson Industries Board of Directors had forced him to resign. While all this was unfolding, Adrian watched everything from Lily's hospital room, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, producers, and lawyers offering their services. He ignored them all, focused only on his daughter, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Mercy General to announce they were terminating her treatment, as Patterson had threatened. It never came. Instead, at 7 p.m., Dr. Patel entered the room with an expression Adrian couldn't quite read. "Mr. Cross, I need to speak with you." Adrian's heart seized. This was it. This was the moment they told him Lily's treatment was over, that his choice had killed his daughter. "I understand," he said, his voice breaking. "Just please give me a few minutes to explain to her." "Mr. Cross," Dr. Patel interrupted gently, "I'm not here to terminate treatment. I'm here to tell you that in light of recent events, Mercy General's Board of Directors has voted to provide full coverage for Lily's remaining treatment at no cost to you. Additionally, several charitable foundations have reached out offering to establish funds for her long-term care. You don't need to worry about money anymore. Your daughter will receive every treatment she needs for as long as she needs it." Adrian stared at the doctor, unable to process the words. I don't understand." Dr. Patel smiled. "The world knows your story now, Mr. Cross. They know what you risked to do the right thing, and they want to help. You're not alone anymore." Over the next week, the full magnitude of what Adrian had set in motion became clear. The FDA revoked approval for Helixorin's continued trials and launched a comprehensive review of Patterson Industries' entire research portfolio. Criminal charges were filed against Hartwell, Fletcher, and 6 other executives. The families of trial participants who had died began receiving settlements from Patterson as the company desperately tried to avoid complete collapse. And Adrian Cross, the broke janitor who had been down to his last dollar, became a symbol of something larger than himself. News outlets called him a hero, a whistleblower, the man who stood up to corporate power when everyone else looked away. Books were written, movies were optioned. His story became a rallying cry for medical ethics reform and whistleblower protections. But Adrian ignored most of that. He was too busy being a father. Lily's treatment continued successfully. Her numbers improved week by week. The cancer went into remission. By early spring, 6 months after Adrian had walked into that conference room with a hidden recording device, Dr. Patel declared her cancer-free. She would need monitoring, regular checkups, continued vigilance, but she was alive, thriving, growing stronger every day. The settlement money from Patterson's bankruptcy proceedings meant Adrian could afford a small house with a yard. And yes, they got a puppy, a golden retriever named Hope that Lily adored. Adrian returned to accounting, this time at a nonprofit organization dedicated to healthcare access, using his skills to help people instead of corporations. One evening, nearly a year after the story broke, Adrian and Lily sat in their backyard, watching Hope chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Lily was 10 now, her hair grown back, her cheeks full of color, her laughter ringing out like music Adrian had thought he would never hear again. "Daddy," she said, leaning against him, "do you ever think about that time when everything was really bad?" "Sometimes," Adrian admitted. "Why do you ask?" "Because I want you to know something." Lily looked up at him, her eyes serious. "I was really scared. I knew things were bad, even though you tried to hide it, but I was never scared that you wouldn't take care of me. I always knew you would do whatever it took to keep me safe." Adrian's throat tightened. "Baby girl, "And you did," Lily continued. "You saved me, but you also saved a lot of other people too. People I'll never meet who will never get sick because of that bad medicine, because you stopped those mean people. That makes you a hero, Daddy, my hero." Adrian pulled his daughter close, tears streaming down his face. "You're my hero too, Lily. You fought so hard. You never gave up. You're the bravest person I know." They sat together as the stars emerged, fireflies dancing, hope barking joyfully at shadows, and Adrian thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that moment in the convenience store, counting pennies and choosing between bread and gas, to this peaceful evening in their own backyard. From despair to hope, from defeat to victory, from the edge of destruction to something like peace. The world had called him a hero, but Adrian knew the truth. He wasn't a hero. He was just a father who loved his daughter more than he feared the consequences of doing what was right. He was just a man who had been broken and broke and down to his last dollar, who had discovered that sometimes the things that cost us everything are the only things truly worth having. He was just Adrian Cross, and that was enough. 3 years later, Adrian stood in front of the United States Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, testifying about the need for stronger whistleblower protections in pharmaceutical research. Lily, now 13 and cancer-free for years, sat in the gallery watching her father speak truth to power, watching him fight for people who had no voice, just as he had fought for her. The Patterson Industries case had led to sweeping reforms, new regulations requiring transparent reporting of clinical trial results, stronger penalties for companies that concealed adverse events, better protections for whistleblowers who exposed corporate malfeasance. The 47 people who had not died in vain. Their sacrifice, involuntary as it was, had changed the system. But for Adrian, the greatest victory was simpler. It was coming home every evening to a house filled with laughter. It was watching his daughter grow into a strong, compassionate young woman who understood that doing the right thing was worth any cost. It was lying in bed at night, no longer consumed by fear and desperation, but filled instead with gratitude for the second chance he had been given. The journey from despair to hope is never straight. It twists and turns, rises and falls, breaks you down before it builds you back up. Adrian's journey had taken him through the darkest valleys, stripped him of everything except his integrity and his love for his daughter. And in losing everything, he had found something more valuable than money or security or comfort. He had found purpose. He had found courage. He had found proof that one person, even someone down to their last dollar, even someone broken and powerless and afraid, could change the world. And sometimes that's the most powerful story of all. Adrian Cross's story reminds us that heroism isn't about having power or money or influence. It's about having the courage to stand up when it would be easier to stay silent. It's about choosing what's right over what's safe. It's about looking at the impossible odds, the terrible risks, the inevitable suffering, and deciding that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. Every day, people face impossible choices. Every day, someone has to decide whether to speak up or stay silent, whether to fight or surrender, whether to risk everything for a principle or accept the injustice of an imperfect world. Adrian's story shows us that these choices matter, that one person can make a difference, that the system can be changed when ordinary people do extraordinary things. But more than that, it shows us what we're capable of when we're pushed to our limits, when we have nothing left to lose except our integrity, when the only choice left is between being broken by the world or breaking the world's injustice. Adrian chose to fight, and in fighting, he saved not just his daughter, but countless others who would have suffered if he had stayed silent. The pharmaceutical industry is different now because of what Adrian did. Real people are alive because of his courage. Families have loved ones who would have been lost to corporate greed and medical malfeasance. And a little girl named Lily got to grow up because her father loved her more than he feared the consequences of doing the right thing. So I ask you, what would you do? If you discovered evidence of wrongdoing that was hurting people, but exposing it would cost you everything, would you speak up? If standing up for what's right meant risking the life of someone you loved, would you have the courage to fight? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about a time you had to choose between what was easy and what was right. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about courage and sacrifice and the power of one person to change the world, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We tell stories about real human struggles, about people who face impossible odds and find the strength to keep fighting. Stories that remind us that heroes don't wear capes, they wear janitor's uniforms and count pennies in convenience stores and love their children more than life itself. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing that stories like this matter. Thank you for being part of a community that understands that justice is worth fighting for, that truth is worth defending, and that even when you're down to your last dollar, hope is always possible. Because in the end, that's what Adrian's story teaches us. It's not about how much money you have, or how much power you wield, or how important the world thinks you are. It's about the choices you make when everything is on the line. It's about the courage to stand up when everyone else is sitting down. It's about loving something more than you fear losing everything. And that kind of courage, that kind of love, that kind of unshakable integrity, that's something no one can ever take away from you. Not corporate lawyers or corrupt executives or a system designed to protect the powerful at the expense of the powerless. They can take your money, your job, your security, but they can't take your soul, unless you let them. Adrian Cross didn't let them. He fought. He won, and his daughter grew up in a world that was just a little bit better because her father refused to stay silent. Remember his story. Remember that one person can make a difference. Remember that doing the right thing is always worth it, even when the cost is everything you have. And never, ever underestimate the power of someone who has nothing left to lose except their integrity. Because that person, broke and broken and down to their last dollar, might just be the most dangerous person in the world. To those who believe the system can be changed, to those who fight even when the odds are impossible, to those who love so fiercely they would sacrifice everything to protect what matters, this story is for you. Stay strong, keep fighting, and never give up hope, even when you're down to your last dollar. Because sometimes that's exactly when life is about to change forever.